In many companies that are not heavily regulated, like our industry, let's say, they could be an annual meeting of the board, and that's fine. But in our industry, we recommend a much more frequent meeting cadence because there are a lot of things that need to be approved in home health and hospice that just happen on a kind of a quarterly system. Hi everyone, my name is Mariam Treystman from the Home Health Consultant, and today we're going to be talking about governing body meetings. But first, if you like our content, please like, share, and subscribe. So what are governing body meetings? Well, the governing body or the governing board in any kind of corporate structure is going to be the board that you hear about in like movies and things like that. So if you've ever watched a movie about like a company and then there's like a board and then there's like votes and people are like trying to persuade the different members of whatever, the organization is to vote this way or that way. And it always like in all those movies, it feels like life or death, like if they're going to like vote this way or that way. That's your governing board. So the governing body's purpose is essentially to manage and be responsible for the overall functioning of the entire organization. A quick like Google AI search kind of thing says that a corporation's governing board provides strategic direction, oversight, and accountability. So like pretty much they're just like responsible for the entire company, that it runs well and so on, but they do not do anything day to day. Of course, if let's say someone's on the board and also holds a position in the company, then they are involved in the day to day. But for the most part, the board members are there to kind of like strategically advise and direct the entire organization and lead the direction of the company and the strategy. So a lot of their responsibilities include like hiring and evaluating the CEO and things like that. And in home health and hospice agencies, this is also for the administrator, right? Like the administrator, the DPCS, any reportable positions, and we'll go into what they do in more detail later. Approving major policies and budgets and ensuring financial stability and legal compliance. So this is like the generic description of what a governing body or a governing board does. In any reference in our compliance program, if you ever see reference to the governing body or the governing board, you're going to see it as GB. So governing body or governing board, GB. And GB is a very like common kind of like term for this structure, especially in our industry. Now, the next question often comes up: who participates in the governing body or the governing body meetings and so on? First and foremost, and only, the people that participate in GB meetings are the GB. So the governing board is compiled of like, one or more people that are responsible for the strategic direction and compliance of the agency. The way that people are chosen into the governing board are based on the shareholders' like discretion pretty much. So the shareholders put the board together and they assign the following positions: president of the board, vice president of the board, and the secretary. So I think like one thing to understand the board versus like the organization or the company, one key aspect is that you have board positions. So that's president, vice president, secretary, and other board members maybe that may not have positions or have alternate positions. And then you have the positions of the company. And so that's like CEO, CFO, whatever, things like that. See anything. And then of course the hierarchy underneath. The governing board are the bosses of the C structure people, and they are the in-between between shareholders and the staff of the organization, who are the C-suite people and the hierarchy underneath. And so the board serves to essentially make sure that the organization functions properly and also that the shareholders get their return on investment and get their money returned. So this is the general structure of governing board or governing body in general organizations. in home health hospice, it's still that same structure, but of course we have other positions that are required and mandatory that they also need to approve and hire and things like that. Now that we know who participates in the governing body meetings, a lot of times people will ask, how often do governing body meetings need to occur? How often does the board meet? So this is not a black and white question. There's only nuance in this, but the long story short of this is based on your bylaws. So on your corporate bylaws, and the bylaws are the organizing principles of the governing board. So these are the laws and rules and procedures of the board. So based on your bylaws, and also whenever something happens that they need to meet to make that decision that's time specific. So they will generally meet at some frequency based on bylaws. And then if something comes up, they'll meet again to like approve or whatever, or create strategy around that situation. And for a little like background refresher, a bylaw, it happens when you first incorporate. So when you first set up your corporation, the first thing that happens is that the bylaws are created, and from those bylaws, then you're appointing board members and things like that. Bylaw frequencies could be monthly, could be quarterly, could be annual, and so on. In many companies that are not heavily regulated, like our industry, let's say, they could be an annual meeting of the board, and that's fine. But in our industry, we recommend a much more frequent meeting cadence because there are a lot of things that need to be approved in home health and hospice that just happen on a kind of a quarterly system. I personally think that the best frequency from governing board meetings is a quarterly system. Monthly is a bit overkill. You kind of don't need that kind of attention all the time. Quarterly is like just the right amount. And if you're doing it annually, you're just going to have a lot of like PRN. So, unanticipated, but scheduled meetings to account for like various random situations. So quarterly cadence is going to be great. And then here and there, if you need to approve anything else, then you can. So what do we cover in the governing body meetings? They cover a lot. First and foremost, because they're responsible for the entire functioning of the organization, they have to approve every single thing in the organization. I don't mean like they need to approve like every tiny form they use kind of thing or whatever, but they have to approve all of the policies and procedures. They have to do kind of an approval of all the programs of your company. So fall program, infections, whatever, every single thing there. They have to approve the budget. They have to approve anything that you can consider a reportable change in home health and hospice. They have to approve all of that. So they have to approve location if we're going to be moving or whatever, like they have to do those approvals. They have to approve staff that are reportable. So your administrator, admin designee, DPCS designee, and if you're a hospice medical director and medical director designee. They need to approve every committee, including the members of those committees. So that any rules that govern those committees, they have to approve that as well. And they also have to approve just everything kind of around your QAPI. So the topic you do for the year or whatever time frame, your QAPI topic, they have to review and be aware of the results of the QAPI meetings. So, whatever data that is presented there, and any other kind of committees that have data that's presented, that needs to be presented to the governing board as well for approval. And so essentially, they're not really doing anything day to day, but they have to know every single thing. This includes like, infection numbers, but they're looking at everything on a data basis and not on oh, this patient, this happened to this patient. Like they're not zoning in it on that level. That's for the staff already to deal with that kind of stuff. But on a larger level, like for example, we have a high amount of UTIs, so we need to set QAPI around that, like things like that. They're going to be approving that. So that is the governing board. Governing board is super critical. It's important to have a knowledgeable governing board that understands the rules so that they can be proper in their approvals and things like that. And I hope that your governing board is doing a great job. Sometimes the governing board has one person, sometimes it has 50 people. I don't know. So that's that. That is the governing body and governing body meetings. My name is Mariam Treystman from the Home Health Consultant. And if you like our content, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.